Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. For as long as I can remember, I've always heard of the creature called Sasquatch inhabiting the woods of southern Illinois. Ever since I was a child, I knew that every generation of my family, since we immigrated to southern Illinois from Germany in 1840, has had encounters with Sasquatch. I started spending a lot of time in the woods. Now, bear in mind, leading up to this encounter, I had always heard that Sasquatch was known to be aggressive with humans, but like most people, I thought it would never happen to me. Little did I know, I couldn't have been more wrong. On a night in April of 2017, everything changed, and my outlook on these creatures of the forest shifted forever. Leading up to the encounter, I had been hearing sounds coming from a patch of woods off my family's property for a little over 3 weeks. They were whoops, screams, howls, the usual Bigfoot signs. One night, under a full moon, I decided it was the right time to go and try to capture the creatures on audio and video. I informed the necessary parties where I'd be, packed up my camera and digital recorder, and drove down to the woods where we had been hearing the sounds. I walked in on foot from the main road with my gear and found a tree structure. I started to record it with my camera, hearing movement around me the whole time my light was focused on the structure. I continued walking, reaching a meadow bordered by trees and creeks on both sides. After crossing one creek, I climbed up the other side and sat down on a log to rest my back and legs. I turned on my audio recorder to note what I had seen and heard throughout the night. Then, I reached into my back pocket, pulled out a can of tobacco, took a pinch, and put it in my lip. When I popped the lid back on, it made a really solid sound, like a tree knock. About 10 seconds later, I started hearing chatter all around me at a whisper level, real quiet but distinct enough to recognize speech. I sat there, listening to 2 or 3 creatures talking back and forth up the hill behind me, in the trees. I was so mesmerized by the sound that I forgot to turn my recorder back on. This went on for about a minute. The creatures were going back and forth, sounding almost like children talking, but it wasn't in English. I don't know what language or what it could have been. Suddenly, I heard a large tree crashing through the canopy across the creek, about 100 yards away, followed by the sound of something cannonballing into the creek and coming up the bank. Out of the creek came a very large Sasquatch. From what I could see in the moonlight, the creature was running across the meadow toward me. I got out of there as fast as I could. I grabbed my phone, called my backup, and told them it was a code black, which means an aggressive individual. I made it to the main road, where there was a stone culvert under the road. I crawled in deep enough to be out of reach of the creature, shining my light out the one end and into the woods. That's when I saw the creature come to the edge of the woods I had just run out of. It stood there, watching me. Then I saw headlights coming over the hill, shining across the woods, followed by the sound of a car horn. That's when the creature turned and walked back into the woods. It wasn't until my team members dropped me off at my truck that I realized I had run out of the woods without my video camera and little tripod. Despite returning to that area many times, I still haven't been able to find my camera to this day. Word to the wise, expect the unexpected. Don't think that just because something has only happened in a faraway place, it can't happen to you. Sasquatch are unpredictable and far more intelligent than we give them credit for. I was 5 when this incident took place. My brother and I had moved in with our Nan and Pop a few months earlier because our mom had abandoned us that year in 1986. Nan and Pop's house was on a farm in the Tasmanian countryside, and there was a beautiful bushland on the right side of the house. I frequently went to a small clearing in the bush, which was visible from the house, so Nan was okay with me going there to pick the beautiful, fragrant boronia flowers. Now, to the story. It was around 5 p.m. when I went to the clearing in the bush. Since it was daylight savings time, there were about 4 hours of sunlight left, so it wasn't considered a bad time of day to go and pick boronia. As I picked my last flower and prepared to head home, all the birds that had been chirping, along with the sound of the gentle breeze and typical bush noises, suddenly stopped. My young mind couldn't grasp why that was. I turned to walk home, and that's when I heard footsteps crunching through the dry gum leaves and dead bracken. I started to feel scared. Then I heard a voice calling, "Becky. Becky, it's me." It sounded like my mom's soft, nervous voice, but something was off. I called out, "Mom? Mom, where are you?" By this point, I was starting to cry a little, thinking that maybe my mom had come back. But the voice repeated, "Becky. Becky, it's me." The footsteps were getting closer, and the pleasant smell of boronia was suddenly overtaken by the stench of sour milk. I gagged and tried to head home, hoping for some fresh air, but a figure slowly emerged into the clearing, moving awkwardly, like a baby learning to walk. As it got closer, I realized it wasn't my mom. It was an animal, walking on two legs. It looked mangy and starved. Its eyes had an eerie green and yellow glow, and they were locked straight on me. I was so scared I couldn't move. It looked like an animal I'd seen in a book or a video before, its beige, matted coat and brown stripes down the sides of its body. Then it said again, standing right in front of me, "Becky. Becky, it's me." It was trying to lure me by mimicking my mom's voice. I dropped the flowers and ran out of the clearing, weaving through the trees. As I was about to jump the fence, the creature started running after me, holding my flowers in its rotten, snarling mouth. Just then, it let out an evil, ear-piercing screech. I screamed in terror, but I managed to get over the fence. When I finally caught my breath, I realized it was dark. I saw flashlights and heard a police radio near the house. I ran to the veranda, where Nan and Pop were waiting, and they held me so tight. Police and neighbors had been out searching for me. I wasn't in trouble, but they knew I had been frightened. I told them I didn't remember going deeper into the bush. They even said they had heard the screech of that thing in the scrub. It turns out, I had been missing in the bush for 5 hours. It was around 10 p.m. when I made it back home, but I couldn't understand how that was possible. Not long after, at school, we were learning about extinct animals in Australia. When I saw a picture of a thylacine, I went pale. Something evil had tried to pose as a messed-up version of a Tasmanian tiger that night. That horrible evening made me despise the smell of boronia for years, even though I once loved it. Now, at 37, I can finally have those flowers in my home without being triggered into fear again. That was the first and last time I ever encountered that creature. This happened back when I was 12 or 13 years old. A little backstory first, my dad and I volunteered at a bird banding station. If you don't know what bird banding is, it's when researchers put small metal bands on the legs of birds and release them to track their migration patterns. We used mist nets in the woods to catch the birds instead of traditional traps to avoid harming them. Now, the guy who owned the bird banding station and the entire property, we'll call him R, would let me wander the woods while he collected birds from the nets. R's property was massive, with woods, countryside, marshland, you name it. Back to the story, it was a cool summer morning, and I was wandering in my usual part of the forest. It wasn't long before I noticed something strange. It was unusually silent. Normally, I would hear at least a thrush or blue jay, but there was nothing. Suddenly, in the distance, I heard what sounded like a distressed baby deer or cat. Being the curious animal lover that I was, I decided to follow the sound. However, as I got closer, the sound seemed to move further away. Soon, I found myself near the edge of R's property. The wailing sounded like it was nearby one moment, but then far away the next. Confused and a little creeped out, I kept following it. A few moments later, I came across a small deer blind. I looked inside to see if anyone was messing with me, but no one was there. When I took a closer look at the blind, I noticed something odd. It had massive slashes on the sides. They looked like someone had hacked at it with a knife or as if some animal had clawed at it. But there weren't any bears in my part of Michigan, so it struck me as strange. Still being a curious 13-year-old, I continued on, trying to find the source of the distressed sounds. I walked along the edge of ours woods, careful not to stray too far. Frustration began to build. Where was this noise coming from? So, in my naive curiosity, I mimicked the sound right back at the animal, hoping it would show itself. Not a minute passed before I heard a noise that I'll never forget. It was a low, guttural growl, like a dog's growl mixed with a buck's grunt. No deer sounded like that. Something in my brain screamed at me to get out of there, and I didn't hesitate. I bolted, leaping over twigs and branches, running as fast as I could until I reached ours front yard. As I made my way toward his house, I heard the growl again, this time from about 10 meters behind me, still coming from the woods. I ran to the research shack, knowing I wasn't home and the house was probably locked. I didn't think anyone would believe me, so I just told them a deer had growled at me. But I knew what I had heard. It wasn't a deer, nor did it sound like a coyote or a dog. It was something else. Although I never saw anything, I believe whatever it was trying to lure me off the property for reasons I can't fathom. I've thought about it a lot, and I wonder if it could have been a Wendigo. They're known to mimic animal sounds and even voices, and I live near the Great Lakes, which is a hot spot for Wendigo sightings. It could have been a skinwalker, though they're usually more associated with the western states. Whatever it was, I still don't know. But from that day on, I've never gone into those woods alone again. Don't ignore your instincts when something feels off. Always trust your gut. To start off, I used to be a skeptic when it came to anything paranormal. I never believed in ghosts, aliens, or anything like that. Also, I don't scare easily. I practice martial arts and stay calm in tough situations. Now, I'm not the greatest writer, but this story is based on what we saw and what happened. On to the story. My friends Jason, Michael, and I planned a weekend camping trip to Wrightwood, California. We arrived around 4:30 p.m., giving us enough daylight to set up our tents. Everything was normal until about 9 p.m., when we started hearing noises coming from the left side of where we were sitting. We brushed it off as wildlife and continued catching up with each other, as life had been busy for all of us. Then, we heard claws digging into the trees behind us. Jason grabbed his gun, just in case, since there are mountain lions and black bears in the area. A few minutes passed, and we didn't hear anything else, so we settled back down, had a few drinks, and continued hanging out. But I'm not joking when I say the next sound shook us. A loud howl came from the right of us. I couldn't tell exactly how far away it was, but it was close enough to make us fall silent. By this time, it was about midnight. That's when Michael said he saw something, about 5 feet tall, darting between the trees. He told me to get my flashlight, so I pointed it toward the spot. What we saw was no small animal. It was standing on 2 legs, easily towering over us. If I had to guess, it wasn't 5 feet tall like Michael had thought, it was closer to 8 feet. The creature had a dog-like face, with grayish-black fur covering its body. Its physique was similar to a black bear, but far more muscular. Before we could react, Jason fired a few rounds at it, and the creature seemed startled and ran off. We didn't stick around, we made a mad dash for our trucks and got the heck out of there. The next morning, we went back to collect our tents and gear. When we got there, the tents were shredded beyond repair. We checked the trees nearby, and deep claw marks were gouged into the bark. Whatever it was that we saw, it wasn't a black bear. And, to be honest, I'm still scared by what I saw that night. So, if you ever decide to go camping in Wrightwood, California, be very, very careful. Take protection with you. Not everything out in those woods has been documented by man. This happened about a year ago during a camping trip with my dad in late July or early August. It was a weekend trip, and we were the only ones at the campground. For privacy, I won't say the name of the park, but it was in Indiana. One night, I woke up suddenly in my tent and checked the time on my phone. It was 3:30 a.m. I didn't really want to get out of the tent, but my bladder had other plans, forcing me to move. Normally, I'd find the sounds of the forest comforting, but for some reason, they unsettled me that night. About 50 yards away, uphill, there was a porta potty. Since I'm a girl, the option to pee in the woods wasn't ideal. I grabbed the headlamp my mom had loaned me, turned it on, and reluctantly made my way toward the porta potty. I was talking to myself, mostly complaining about my bladder and how dim the headlamp was. The light was so faint that it barely illuminated 5 feet ahead, so I had to rely on the moonlight to guide me. I made it to the porta potty without any issues, relieved myself, and started heading back. About halfway to the tent, I noticed something strange. The forest had gone silent, eerily so. My mind began racing, imagining all the horrors that could be lurking in the woods: skinwalkers, wendigos, Bigfoots, things waiting to snatch me up. I ran the last 20 yards back to camp, my headlamp dimming more with every step. As I caught my breath, I got an overwhelming sense that I was being watched. I turned to face the tree line that bordered the lake, and that's when I saw them, a pair of large, golden yellow eyes staring back at me. My tent was close to the tree line, meaning whatever was watching me was less than 15 feet away. I froze in fear, staring at the glowing eyes. And then my headlamp died. But the eyes, they still glowed. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a coyote or a large stray dog, and the headlamp had been reflecting off its eyes, making them appear to glow. But the eyes didn't dim when the headlamp went out, they were truly glowing. Terrified, I took a few steps back and lost my balance, falling onto my butt. The eyes were getting closer, and in the moonlight, I could make out a silhouette. It wasn't the size of a coyote or dog, this thing was far larger and seemed to be on its hind legs. I'd guess it stood taller than 6 feet and had a hunched-over body, with a head resembling that of a husky or wolf dog. Oddly enough, I didn't feel malevolence from the creature. I know many people who encounter dogmen report feeling an overwhelming sense of danger, but I didn't. Instead, I felt like it was more curious or confused than threatening. We locked eyes for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute. Then, the creature dropped back onto all fours and retreated into the forest, making no sound as it disappeared. The next morning, I checked for tracks along the muddy banks of the lake, but found none, which seemed impossible. I don't know what I saw that night. It wasn't a bear, we don't have grizzlies in Indiana, and black bears aren't common. I'm still at a loss. What do you guys think it could have been? Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.